Have you ever had one of those weeks where it felt like the entire world is just kind of resting on your shoulders? You're sitting at your desk, staring at a mountain of work, and you feel this crushing pressure. And it's not just because of the work, but because you feel like if you don't handle every single detail perfectly, everything's going to fall apart. You feel responsible for your boss's mood, for your coworkers' deadlines, and even for your family's reaction to the stress that you're feeling. Or you might experience the exact opposite. Maybe you feel like you're just kind of drifting through life, tossed around by waves that you just can't control. You might find yourself thinking, it really doesn't matter what I do. The system's rigged, or I was just unlucky. It feels like life is something that happens to you rather than something you actually participate in. If you've ever felt either of these things, that heavy burden of hyper responsibility or that hollow weight of helplessness, you aren't alone. And more importantly, you aren't necessarily failing at life. What you're likely experiencing is a psychological trap that's known as the control fallacy. The control fallacy is a distortion in how we perceive reality. It's fairly common, and understanding how it works can be one of the most transformative things you can do for your mental clarity and for your peace of mind. So let's break this down. What exactly is the control fallacy? First, a quick clarification's in order. The fallacy isn't about whether or not you actually have control over things. It's about the perception of control. It's an error in how our minds calculate our influence in the world. It generally shows up in two distinct but very equally exhausting directions. The first is the internal control fallacy. This is when we overestimate our power. We mistakenly believe we're responsible for things that are actually way outside of our jurisdiction. The emotions, actions, and ultimate life outcomes of other people, or large-scale external events. It's this belief that if I just try harder, or if I just act differently, I can fix all this. The second direction is the external control fallacy. It's the mirror image of the first. In this fallacy, we underestimate our power. We view ourselves as powerless victims of fate. We blame luck, timing, or other people for every negative outcome in our lives. It's a state of perceived helplessness, where agency starts to feel like an illusion. When it comes down to it, the control fallacy is really just a calibration error. Our mental compass is pointing either too far forward, I have to fix everything, or too far toward nothing I do matters. Because these fallacies are very subtle, they don't usually announce themselves with a loud alarm. They settle into our daily habits like a slow-moving fog. When we're stuck in the internal control fallacy, it usually comes out as overestimation. You find yourself micromanaging teams at work because you feel that their mistakes are a direct reflection of your worth. Or maybe you spend hours ruminating on why a family member or a friend is upset, trying to solve their mood like it's a math problem. It leads to an exhausting way of living where every fluctuation in the environment feels like a personal failure. On the flip side, the external control fallacy shows up as chronic blaming and avoidance of responsibility. When something goes wrong, a missed promotion, a failed diet, or a broken friendship, the immediate reflex is to point outward. The economy's set up to make me fail. My boss hates me. I just don't have any good luck. While external factors are certainly real, this fallacy happens when they're used as a shield that prevents you from looking at where your own actions could have made a difference. In both cases, the result's the same: a loss of touch with reality and a significant increase in unnecessary suffering. It's easy to feel frustrated with ourselves when we realize we're falling into these traps. You might ask, why can't my brain just see things clearly? The truth is, your brain isn't trying to make you miserable. It's actually trying to keep you safe. This pattern is deeply rooted in our biology. For our ancestors, survival depended on two things: pattern recognition and controlling their environments. If you could predict where the predator was, that's pattern recognition, and figure out how to stay away from it, that's the control, you live to see another day. Our brains are essentially prediction engines. We're wired to seek patterns because certainty feels like safety. When we encounter uncertainty, our brain goes into overdrive trying to resolve it. That's why the control fallacy becomes so rigid during times of stress. When life gets unpredictable, it could be because of some global crisis or some personal loss. Our brain looks for shortcuts. We want to regain a sense of order. To combat this fear of chaos, we might adopt the internal fallacy, assuming that if we just control more variables, we can stop the chaos from happening. Or to protect our egos from the pain of failure, we might adopt the external fallacy, deciding that since nothing matters, we don't have to face the risk of trying. In short, these fallacies are cognitive shortcuts. They're simplified but very distorted versions of reality designed to help us navigate a really complex world. When you add in past experience, like growing up in an environment where you did have to be hyper responsible, maybe for a parent's emotions, or experiencing a period of profound helplessness, these patterns can become deeply ingrained default settings in our minds. The control fallacy is a cognitive trap, but it's one we don't have to stay in. It's a matter of perception, and that means we can relearn how to perceive. It's not about deleting our thoughts. That's just not possible. It's about building the capacity to observe our thoughts and to move through them. The first step is awareness. You have to catch yourself in the act. To do this, look for these specific emotional red flags. Are you constantly blaming others or circumstances for the problems you face? Do you feel a total lack of motivation because you feel like your efforts won't matter anyway? When things go wrong, is your first instinct to say, "It wasn't my fault"? If these things are happening, you might be dealing with the external control fallacy, which can lead to those feelings of helplessness. Or are you assuming responsibility for every outcome or every person's happiness? Are you carrying heavy, unearned feelings of guilt or shame? Do you feel a sense of burnout that seems to be disproportionate to your actual workload? These are signs of the internal fallacy, that sense of being over-responsible for everything. For example, if you find yourself staying up until 2 a.m. worrying about whether a friend is mad at you, even though you haven't said or done anything wrong, that's an internal fallacy. You're trying to control their internal emotional state. The next step is to challenge the thoughts. Once you catch that thought, don't just let it pass. Put it through some critical analysis. Ask yourself, what are the assumptions that I'm making here? Is there another way to look at this whole situation based on facts rather than assumptions? We can use an example of a missed deadline. The internal fallacy tells you, I missed the deadline because I didn't manage the team, myself, or the environment enough. It's all my fault. Challenging those thoughts may lead to something like, is it true that I'm solely responsible? Did others delay their input? Did an unexpected technical issue occur? Is it possible to acknowledge my part without taking the entire blame? And the third step is focusing on what you can actually control. This is really the most practical part of the process. You need to draw a line in the sand between your circle of concern and your circle of what you can actually influence. You can't control other people's actions, their opinions, or the weather. Attempting to do that is an exhausting waste of energy. But you can control your own actions, your preparation, your boundaries, and your responses. If a project at work is failing, you can't control the budget cuts, but you can control how clearly you communicate the impact of those cuts to you and the people on your team. Focus your energy where it really matters. And finally, practice reframing. This isn't about the toxic positivity that's so evident in corporate America today, or pretending that everything's great. It's about turning a close-ended, distorted thought into an open-ended, learning-oriented thought. So instead of saying, my group project wasn't very successful, it failed because the whole team was lazy. Try this instead. The project didn't meet our goals, but I'm still proud of how I manage my part in the project. Next time, I'm going to suggest some better ways to track everyone's progress. Or instead of saying, I have to make sure everyone in this meeting is satisfied or else I've failed, try, my goal is to present my ideas clearly and to listen to feedback. Whether they agree or not is up to them, but I'm confident in my preparation. As we wrap up, I just want to leave you with a reminder. Everyone struggles with these cognitive distortions. It's just a part of being human. You're going to slip into these mindsets. You'll find yourself blaming luck and fate on a bad day, or feeling the weight of the world during a stressful month. The goal isn't to achieve some state of perfect robotic rationality where you never feel overwhelmed again. The goal is simply to become aware. When you notice the fallacy taking hold, try to cut yourself a little bit of slack. Don't add guilt for feeling guilty onto an already heavy burden. Just observe it. Notice the pattern without self-criticism. Changing ingrained thought patterns takes time and consistent effort. It's a practice, and it's a lot like physical exercise. Celebrate the small victories, the moments where you caught yourself mid-blame or mid-worry and chose to step back into your actual sphere of influence. With awareness and practice, you can loosen the grip of the control fallacy, and you can start to have a life that's a lot more empowered, a lot more grounded, and a lot more peaceful. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and if you found this useful, please consider subscribing and clicking that like button. Thanks again. Take good care.
There's a young man lighting up the fire tonight, doing his best to make things right in his mind. There's a young girl laying on the tracks tonight. Trying to douse the light that keeps her up. She has no love. There's a siren screaming somewhere outside.